Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. First, my apologies for not getting last week's box office roundup video out. I had recorded the video and was working on it when a family emergency occurred, so I was never able to complete it in a timely fashion. But I will mention some points of interest from last weekend in this video. So during the 12th weekend of 2025 that ended on March 23rd, one new movie made it into this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office, and I'm sure you know what movie that is. But moving on, their cumulative total earnings for the weekend rose considerably by 80.9% to $59.2 million, as compared with last weekend's adjusted cumulative total of $32.7 million. And last weekend's $32.7 million was a new record low for the top 5 cumulative total since I started to track it nearly 1 year ago. That was a point that would have been in last week's video had I been able to complete it. So this weekend was the 5th consecutive weekend that the top 5 cumulative domestic box office total was below $100 million, but it did manage to rise above $50 million for the first time in 4 weeks. And that made it a slightly better weekend for domestic movie theaters. But before proceeding, if you're enjoying this video, please consider pressing the like button, and if you'd like to see more of my content, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. And I want to convey my deepest thanks and appreciation to everyone who has subscribed. This weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office included the following. Opening at number 1 was Disney's modernized live-action movie remake entitled Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot.
Oh, goody, goody! Oh, goody, goody, gum.
Clinging to number 2 was Focus Features' $60 million suspense thriller entitled Black Bag. Rising to number 3 was Disney's and Marvel Studios' newest MCU movie entitled Captain America: Brave New World, starring Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford. Falling to number 4 was Warner Bros. Plan B Entertainment's, Offscreens, and Kate Street Picture Company's sci-fi black comedy movie entitled Mickey 17. And falling to number 5 after opening at number 1 last week was Infrared Films' Circle of Confusions and Safe House Pictures' low-budget action movie entitled Novocaine. Snow White opened by earning $43 million domestically and $44.3 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend box office total of $87.3 million. Now, for those of you who watched my previous video, in which I gave my first set of projections for Snow White, you might recall 2 of the things that I had said. First, in a February 27th article, The Hollywood Reporter had predicted a domestic opening weekend box office range for the movie of around $48 million to $58 million, which had a midpoint of $53 million. So the actual $43 million domestic opening weekend box office earned by Snow White was $10 million below the $53 million midpoint that The Hollywood Reporter had predicted. That's a huge difference and most definitely not in the movie's favor. Second, I also said that the movie needed to keep its domestic share below 38.81% in order for it to have a chance of being able to break even, which also expected a higher domestic opening weekend box office than it actually earned. But as of this weekend, the domestic share is currently 49.26%, which is very close to the 52% domestic share that I said is one standard deviation above the 38.81% based on 18 previous Disney live-action movies that premiered over a span of 20 years between 1994 and 2024. So beyond what I had said in last week's video, the low opening weekend box office earned by Snow White correlates very well with the very low 43% tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes. And when you click on that and look further, the top critic score is much lower at 28%. And as for the audience scores, the quote-unquote verified audience rating is at 72%, while the all-audience rating is 22%. So I believe that it's very safe to say that most people don't like Disney's latest live-action movie, Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler. And as you will see later in this video, it's very likely that Snow White is a bona fide flop. Black Bag earned another $4.4 million domestically, $4.9 million internationally, and $12.3 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $14.9 million, $9.2 million, and $24.1 million respectively. Captain America Brave New World earned another $4.1 million domestically, $5.5 million internationally, and $12 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $192.1 million, $208.7 million, and $400.8 million respectively. Mickey 17 earned another $3.9 million domestically, $12.6 million internationally, and $19.6 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $40.2 million, $69.8 million, and $110 million respectively. Novocaine earned another $3.8 million domestically, $3.5 million internationally, and $10.6 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $15.8 million, $5.3 million, and $21.1 million respectively. That brings us to several other movies that I am continuing to track but are no longer in or never were in the top 5, and they include the following. Falling to number 16 was Walt Disney Pictures' animated prequel entitled Mufasa the Lion King. Falling to number 26 was Paramount Pictures' Sega Sammy Group's original films Marza Animation Planets and Blur Studios' animated three-quel entitled Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And falling to number 27 was Walt Disney Animation Studios' sequel entitled Moana 2. Mufasa the Lion King earned another $700,000 domestically, $2.5 million internationally, and $3.8 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $253.8 million, $464.2 million, and $718 million respectively. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 earned another $46,000 domestically, $1.7 million internationally, and $1.8 million globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $236.1 million, $255 million, and $491.1 million respectively. Moana 2 earned another $44,000 during the weekend and $75,000 during the week domestically, $808,000 internationally, and $928,000 globally to bring its current domestic, international, and global gross box office totals up to $460.4 million, $598.5 million, and $1,058.8 million respectively. Now, to know whether these movies are going to break even or not, as well as how much money they might be losing, we need to estimate their break-even points. When a movie's marketing budget is known, we can add it to the movie's production budget and then multiply the sum by 2. Otherwise, we can multiply the production budget by 2.5 for a single mid-range estimated break-even point, or by both 2.5 and 3.0 for a broader estimated break-even point range. Both methods account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves. For Snow White, with its reported production budget of $213.9 million, as reported by Forbes, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $534.8 million to $641.7 million. For Captain America Brave New World, with its production budget of around $362.5 million, as reported by World of Real and not the $180 million that Disney has clearly falsely reported because they don't want their shareholders knowing how much the movie is losing, that yields an estimated break-even point range of around $906.3 million to $1,087.5 million. For Mickey 17, with its reported production budget of $118 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $295 million to $354 million. For Mufasa the Lion King, with its production budget of $200 million, as reported by multiple sources, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. For Sonic the Hedgehog 3, with its production budget of around $122 million, as reported by the New York Times, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $305 million to $366 million. For Moana 2, with its reported production budget of $150 million, that yields a break-even point range of $375 million to $450 million. So in this video, I am no longer projecting or never have projected what the final domestic or global gross box office earnings might be for the movies Mufasa the Lion King, Moana 2, or Sonic the Hedgehog 3, because their expected future earnings are either currently too small, possibly non-existent, or going unreported, or their projected earnings aren't much higher than their current earnings. And each of these movies has already made bank. And that now brings us to the movies whose final domestic and global gross box office revenues I am currently projecting, which includes Snow White, Captain America Brave New World, and Mickey 17. For Snow White, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 23.51% to 35.42%, which are plus and minus one standard deviation away from the overall average weekly drop of 29.47% for the previous 18 Disney live-action movies released from 1994 to 2024, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $121.4 million at the low end, $145.7 million at the mid-range, and $181.4 million at the upper end. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 49.26%, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $246.4 million at the low end, $295.7 million at the mid-range, and $368.3 million at the upper end. So with the movie's estimated break-even point range of $534.8 million to $641.7 million, Snow White is a flop and currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $166.4 million to $395.3 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Disney currently stands to lose around $83.2 million to $197.7 million. For Captain America Brave New World, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 31.64% to 44.46%, which are plus and minus one standard deviation away from the overall MCU average weekly drop of 38.05%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $200.2 million at the low end, $202.7 million at the mid-range, and $206 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 47.93%, which is higher than last week, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $417.8 million at the low end, $422.8 million at the mid-range, and $429.8 million at the upper end, which is higher than last week's projection. So with the movie's estimated break-even point range of $906.3 million to $1,087.5 million, Captain America Brave New World currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $476.4 million to $669.7 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Disney and Marvel Studios currently stand to lose around $238.2 million to $334.9 million. So that effectively makes Captain America Brave New World the biggest flop for 2025 so far this year. And even if you truly want to believe Disney's heavily underreported and unrealistic fake production budget of $180 million, which is hardly believable given how dependent the movie is on CGI and all of the reshoots that were done, the movie would still be a flop because Disney and Marvel Studios would still be facing a loss of around $10.1 million to $61.1 million. For Mickey 17, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $50.7 million at the low end, $53.2 million at the mid-range, and $56.5 million at the upper end, which is lower than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 36.56%, which is lower than last week, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $138.8 million at the low end, $145.6 million at the mid-range, and $154.6 million at the upper end, which is lower than last week's projection. Then given the movie's estimated break-even point range of $295 million to $354 million, Mickey 17 is a flop and currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $140.4 million to $215.2 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Warner Brothers, Plan B Entertainment, Offscreen, and Kate Street Picture Company currently stand to lose around $70.2 million to $107.6 million. So to recap, Snow White joins Mickey 17 and Captain America Brave New World as box office flops, while Mufasa the Lion King, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Moana 2 have all made bank. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video and whether you have or are planning to see any of the movies that I talked about. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to each and every one of you who has subscribed to support this channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, and Blue Sky by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.